A historic day in Steelers Nation as Mike Tomlin resigns. What is next for the Steelers football team? Does this mean Aaron Rodgers is on his way out of Pittsburgh as well? Are you now more or less optimistic about what happens in the immediate future for this Pittsburgh Steelers team? And who do we want to be the next head man in charge? And could they really get something if they trade Mike Tomlin? Here we go.
To the corner of the end zone. Oh, for a touchdown!
Yeah, welcome in Dawson and Newbear, and holy cow, man, what a surprise that we are here talking about this tonight. I thought we were going to do a wild card breakdown and an offseason preview, but shortly after lunchtime, the news comes through. Tomlin has resigned. Let me just say nothing but respect to the legend, future Hall of Fame coach, to a man all the players are saying how much they loved playing for him. Here's a quote from Jonnu Smith, guys one at a time as we're leaving the meeting room, shaking his hand, giving our condolences and showing our gratitude. Interesting choice of words there from Jonnu Smith, considering it was a resignation. But whatever the case, that's how he phrased it. And, you know, that kind of stuff matters a lot. You know, how much guys like playing for a coach, and Mike Tomlin definitely aced that test. But I'll say this, Newbear, it matters less than ever. And for that reason, I'm excited to see the Steelers have a chance to see what a post-Tomlin world looks like. How the hell you doing with this story, brother?
Yeah, the best thing that I heard around town today was the idea of paraphrasing a number of different places together. We've all worked at places where you had a bad boss, or you've worked at a company where maybe the company doesn't hit your numbers, and then they start talking about culture and how the culture is what makes this place great, works like a family and all this other. Like, if the culture is bad, how good do we feel about the leader of that culture? And what I specifically mean by that is start with DK Metcalf. Go through any and all of the different problems that you've had, from communication to literally getting into it with a fan in the stands. And everyone thinks about George Pickens when you talk about problems, and they just quickly gloss over Juju on TikTok. Go all the way back to Le'Veon Bell. Go through the litany. Like, when did this really start? When was the first crack? When did
I mean, stuff is going to happen. You're dealing with a team with 60 players, bro. I'm trying to give the guy a slap in the back and a warm hug as he's leaving after 19 years. Nobody's going to be perfect.
Not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying though is the narrative is about how shocking this is. And to me, it's shocking that it's shocking at all. It's shocking that it takes this level of, I mean, we're talking about historic level, both team and league wide, and it ain't good stuff. It's all bad stuff. It's records that you don't want to be a part of.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you know, it wasn't that shocking to me. I thought because of how much noise we had heard during the regular season, how last night ended, I already felt like this could be headed for a mutual parting of ways. Like, we still don't have a quarterback. It's been 19 years. We might want to draft a young quarterback. We might want to take risk taking a bigger step back and, to try to grow more wholly into the future and find the right answers for the football team, instead of trying to find Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid. Like, once you're in that mode, it's hard to suck bad enough to really be in a position. So
think about that though. How is he going to be the guy after the Kenny Pickett experience? How is he going to be the guy that was going to go get the next post-Ben big-time quarterback in the rebuild or the restructure, or the truly going all in after win now, and how we were splitting hairs all season long? Like, not only did this have to be the time, there's an argument to be made that there are 3 or 4 other times going back overtime where almost every other winning franchise in the NFL would have done this many years ago.
Yeah, I think ultimately the flashpoint, though, was this 2027 option coming up in March, and the Steelers, I believe, began to waffle a little bit on it and show that they weren't sure. And Tomlin just said, you know what, now is as good a time as any, and the Steelers didn't want to fight him on it. This feels a lot more like a mutual parting of ways than a resignation or a force out. I just think it made sense for a lot of reasons, and both parties decided to be adults about it.
Sure. And I'll buy that, and that's fair. And you want to save face, and you want to, when he comes back, when his name goes up, in the stadium, when he goes into their Hall of Fame and the league Hall of Fame, and he's a part of all the reunion tours for this championship team or this anniversary, or his players continue to receive, their flowers in retirement in the years to come. Like, you absolutely, it's a small business. It's a family business. The Rooneys in Pittsburgh, Aaron Rodgers said it in his walkaway bleep show that, he's played for two, maybe the only two franchises in the whole league that are like that. And that's different. This place is different. That's the only reason he got this long of a leash.
For sure. Yeah. And it's going to be really interesting to see what they look for next. We'll talk about that here in just a few minutes on the Knoll Road. Like the video if you're fired up about what comes next for the Steelers in one of the biggest off seasons they've had in team history. First of all, though, New Bear, this does make it a lot less believable that Aaron Rodgers will be back, doesn't it? And I mean, you can't rule it out, but they had such a bromance between Rodgers and Tomlin. I thought they could say, let's go a 20th year for Tomlin and run it back with Aaron Rodgers. There's really not a better option out there in the free agent market or the trade market, and their draft options aren't great now. I could have definitely seen that if Tomlin had been back. And then you also have to consider that if the Steelers didn't want Tomlin back, and that narrative does start to matriculate into the news cycle here, then that would position Aaron Rodgers to maybe feel loyal towards Tomlin and disappointed with the organization. That could be another thing that drives a wedge between Rodgers and the team.
You brought the Josina Anderson report to this show weeks ago, and the build off of that is that this is something that's been in the works behind the scenes, that he was always the coach, the long tenured coach looking for a fresh start that Josina Anderson was talking about. And now that you really get into that and think about what that's all about, think about what Mike Tomlin said last night. The resignation on him at the podium, talking about winning the turnover battle and being up +2, but being down 1 on the scoreboard, and all the different trends and all the different things. I thought last night he was pretty arrogant at the podium, and he was pretty rude. And look, you want people, they're raw. You want them to share those emotions. We bitch, moan, and complain when they don't give us anything, when they don't say anything, when they give us the on to Cincinnati. And then we bitch, moan, and complain when they say too much, when Aaron Rodgers, is rude on his way out after delivering what to that point was a master's class in a post-game experience in a scene like that. But Tomlin the whole time was pretty combative. And you can, like I said, I don't think you have a press release ready to go 5 minutes after the news breaks if this isn't something that's been happening behind closed doors, where, look, you hope you go on a run, and maybe if we go on a run, the tenor, the tone, ultimately the narrative changes, because what did Tomlin say last night? Talk is cheap. You either do or you don't. And if we do, then there's a different conversation to be had. But they did not, and they did not emphatically, and it looked bad, like it has for the better part of a decade.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal, and it was a fitting end to how this season has transpired, and so much Steelers football has transpired post Ben Roethlisberger. So as a final game for the Steelers and Tomlin, as tough as it was pretty fitting. Okay, let's segue now here on the Knoll Road to who we'd like to see as the next head coach. I hope they cast a very wide net. And I hope the Rooneys and Khan bring in a ton of people, because after 2 decades, you can really, be insulated to what's happening outside your building and get used to the norms of your coaching staff. And it can start to feel like this is the only way, or this is the right way. I want them to go out there and interview 24 guys and talk with them and pick their brains about what it takes to be a successful NFL team today. And then after a couple of weeks, come up with an answer, maybe in that week off before we play the Super Bowl or whatever. But just to start with the list of candidates as they've been reported now, maybe that one of the guys at the top is Brian Flores, and I would not be opposed to that. I think I'd be excited about that, especially after working with O'Connell in Minnesota. Maybe there's some offensive guys up there he could wrangle a QB coach or an O-line coach or something like that. Have him come in as the OC. Like, I have as much respect for O'Connell's offense as I do Shanahan McVay. So that would be, I think on the short list of guys right now that if they end up becoming the Steelers head coach, it's worth getting excited about.
Yeah, and Flores, what's really interesting about him is the narrative about him leaving after he was here as a rental in between, kind of like a get right season with everything that he had going on, both personally and professionally, was that they never should have let him out of the building, and that, at the very least, he's the DC head coach in waiting, and there's a clear succession plan type of deal. And that just was never going to happen. Like, there was never going to be a thing where if Tomlin were to stumble, hey, here's the guy that's going to push me out the door. Don't let it hit you on the way to the Hall of Fame. And, at the same time, some of the negative stuff, particularly the Tua and Ryan Fitzpatrick, the QB room down in Miami that hates Brian Flores, I don't mind some of that stuff in terms of what's going to have to happen moving forward. I'm not saying you need to be a dick, but a little bit of a bully. Surely, I think we can all meet in the middle on hard ass. Like, the hard-nosed nature of what it's going to take to get this culture right, to reset the standard and the Steelers way, is going to take somebody who doesn't care if anybody likes him.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Flores might end up being the guy who's just best as a genius DC that's not in charge of like captivating the culture and setting the tone and keeping guys accountable in a professional, respectable way that you got to do with all these, Gen Z kids out here playing the game of football today. I think you should also consider that Miami is one of the worst run organization. It lends itself to frustration and toxicity, and that after a first run as a head coach, there's time to reflect on that and say, okay, I want to do this, that, and the other thing better. I don't want to be that dick. I don't want to, challenge these young guys as much as maybe is comfortable for me in my lived experience. I'd be willing to give another shot to Flores, because I think primarily you're going to earn the players' respect if you win and your scheme is giving them an advantage. And I think especially because of how prevalent scheme discussion is on the internet and how much these guys live on the internet. Like, there's a lot of young players that understand the evolution of scheme better than coaches who have been stuck in their echo chambers of what's successful for decades.
Well, and it's in the game. EA Sports, it's in the game. And it's been in the game, since not long after I was playing, where you boot it up and you put it in. And I've talked back in the summer when we were talking X's and O's, P's and Q's of what this team might look like with the different personnel groupings, Aaron Rodgers, all these tight ends, all the different moves. And then through the trade deadline with the moves that they ultimately did not make, some of this stuff gets distilled down to a single word or a number. Aaron Rodgers is out there with his hand signals. That's why he wants those old heads. Adam Thielen might not be able to run, but he's going to give it everything he's got. He's going to be where he's supposed to be. He's going to make the catch, right? And what's going to be different moving forward is it's going to be it's almost going to be like a different language. It's almost going to be like forget culture for a second. It's going to be like a different planet, because you're going to have these guys coming in here, Red Bull, sleeping at the office. You've seen it was about a year ago when the Vizio stuff and all these different technology platforms that McVay is a huge fan of, where these guys literally go from translating it from legal pad to grease board to computer. It's not Bill Belichick with those cut-ups that take, hours upon hours upon hours to just do third downs. That is almost like, frat hazing for young coaches. These guys are booted up. They're in the matrix, and they're plugged in, and then they teach it, they translate it, and they go out and try to play it as fast as they can. And when you think about how that's going to play going forward, this conversation gets real interesting. You go from Flores, I know you and I have talked about, and you're excited to bring up guys like Shula and all the different ties with the Rooneys, all the different, the McVay, the Shanahan tree. But does this become a thing where the same way I was talking about the attitude and the adjustment that's going to be needed, maybe we need a little bit of Bill Cowher grumpiness, right, to take this thing, back where it needs to be? Do you need to have the guy in charge be from the other side of the ball?
That's interesting, and I was going to actually use that principle to talk about Chris Shula, and the same thing applies to Brian Flores, like defensive guys that have been in the rooms with the leaders of offensive scheme around the NFL, because what the brilliant offensive minds want to know from the defensive guys is, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Because that's what gives us problems. And, if you have coaching staffs that are open to communication and are brilliant and are vulnerable, saying, hey, this kicked our ass last night. How do we go about, solving that? What gives you problems from offense when you show them that look? Like, those are the kind of things in the NFL, great football think tanks around the game, that I think the Steelers primarily should be, focused on tapping into, at least at the beginning of this process. So Chris Shula, defensive coordinator, Rams, is he leader in the clubhouse? If you had a Paulie market or call sheet right now, because the Albert Breer report that we talked about last week, it seems like there's a lot of breadcrumbs pointing Shula to Pittsburgh.
Depends on where you go. I think Kalshi Sports has Flores as high as like 34%. And then, Shula, even Mike McCarthy, handful of Minter, handful of other guys at 10, 11, 12, 13. Flores, from the court of public opinion in the betting markets, because of the name and because of, I think, his want to get back to that place. But I don't think you can talk about Brian Flores without talking about Robert Saleh. And you start talking about, folks who look the part, call the game, teach the game, communicate the game, disciplinarian, authoritarian. Like, I don't know how much, where he rates, he's not the same kind of, Brian Flores was literally called a dictator by the guys down in Miami, but that was also a shit show where the owner was trying to pay him $100,000 per loss to tank. And that was also a tampering situation that ends in a lawsuit. So, some of those things that go down in Miami, there's a lot of stuff that happened behind closed doors. We may never know. And I joked with you before we hopped in here that you could make an argument that on top of the Rooney Rule in and of itself, 1-to-1, you start talking about, maybe Goodell gives him a little nudge to say, make that lawsuit go away by putting, Flores as the leading man. And not that I think that there's like real, juice to that. But you use the term breadcrumbs. It's hard not to hear everyone chatterboxing about Clint Kubiak.
Clint Kubiak could be a nice signing. Seahawks offensive coordinator did a hell of a job with the Saints in 2024. And, they ultimately hit the skids when injuries started happening to him, and they had a very disappointing season. But he was getting people excited even in 2024 with the Saints.
Well, and you know why they're excited? Because Pittsburgh Steelers fan is extremely football intelligent. And what they don't understand is how we signed DK Metcalf with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, who loves to have a guy like Devontae Adams that he throws the ball to 175 times, and DK can't get a ball. Like, what you expect with Kubiak is, we're paying DK Metcalf to be wide receiver 1. We're going to force feed him and make him prove that he can't handle that. Like, JSN blew up, and you saw it coming. I don't know if you saw it coming all pro 1. I don't know if you saw it coming with the numbers that he put up, where, he is literally winning fantasy football leagues the world over. And you start thinking about doing that with who? Sam Darnold, which gives you a ton of confidence thinking about solving the quarterback problem, knowing everything that went into Sam Darnold seeing ghosts in New York and then finding them again on the run to the playoffs in his career resurrection in Minnesota.
It'd be interesting to see if Clint Kubiak had any say in the decision to trade away DK Metcalf. Maybe he's not the biggest fan, and maybe DK would feel some kind of way about that. Matt Burke, DC, with the Texans. We saw last night how good he is, but it's hard to tell. Are you blessed with great players in D'Amico Ryans, or what was Matt Burke doing to be a difference maker? Lou Anarumo, the former DC with the Bengals, got a lot of credit for slowing down Mahomes. Today, he's interviewing with the Giants head coaching job. He's been the DC with the Colts this year. I wanted to ask you about the old guys. You brought up Mike McCarthy, who's got to be close to 60, Pittsburgh guy. This is wild. From Pittsburgh, the label on him, and I was talking to some guys that worked with him in Green Bay, super lazy. Like, they're like, where's coach? And he's getting a massage. Where's coach? He's eating a meatball sandwich. Like just cliche type of stuff. And as the season goes on, like, Mike McCarthy takes pride in his guys practicing less and less to keep them fresh. And I get all that, but the puzzle just adds up to lazy. I think he can help develop how a young quarterback sees the game. but also might frustrate a young quarterback with what we were just talking about there, because his scheme is antiquated. He's like 90s West Coast offense, Micah McCarthy. And when he uses motion, it's basically a trick play. It's not like a foundational scheme to how we attack, but you have McCarthy, and then you have Nick Saban, Pittsburgh guy, and Kurt Cignetti, a Pittsburgh guy, I think 65 and 70 years old there.
Yeah, so that's where it gets really interesting too, because you start talking about, Bishop Boyle, you start talking about Indiana, you start talking about who was at Pitt, how deep are these ties in these how deep do these rivers literally run with some of these guys? Because I mean, they're Western PA and even Pittsburgh proper, through and through. McCarthy's 62, Cignetti's 64, and you start thinking about what the Rooneys want to do. And if you want a guy who's going to be here for 20 years, it's not going to be either one of those dudes. So that's where the Marcus Freeman chatter picks up on the other side of the Saturday conversation. And there's a 1 p.m. press conference, I believe tomorrow, where we might have some news and have to hop right back in here. But you brought up the old heads in general, right? And you started talking. So this Freeman thing is real interesting, because he's either basically announcing that he's Mike Tomlin 2.0, or he's staying at Notre Dame forever with some crazy extension, and they're going to win it all next year. The list is interesting because there's a pretty clear dividing line, right? I mean, you got guys like my cousin, jokingly, but shout out to the motherland, Udinsky, right? And down in Jacksonville, is he 29? And you start talking about, Liam Cohen, Sean McVay, these different trees, the work that he did with Trevor Lawrence and company this year. And then obviously, tough loss. That might be a tough sell. You take the wonder kid from a one and done, and you're like, this looks a lot like something that we know a whole lot about around here. It just feels brand new car smell. And you go, okay, maybe that's too soon. But what about a guy like Joe Brady? What about a guy, who's some of these other guys that have had maybe a little bit more sustained success, who've developed quarterbacks where, look, I know he's a 6th round pick, but when you start talking about what Will Howard is on paper, you squint a little bit, you could see Ben, you could see Josh Allen, some of the numbers are up there. I mean, he wins that national championship surrounded by really good players, but are you going to play him next year to find out if he's an uncut gem, or at the very least put you in a position to go get the guy that you want moving forward long term?
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. That's going to be fascinating. There's so many great angles on what comes next for the Steelers, and we look forward to talking about with you, you guys here throughout the offseason, going into free agency, the trade market, and the draft. It's going to be a very content-rich environment.
Can I just hit the back button for 1 second? Because I know this isn't a quarterback show. I know this isn't a position group show. I know we're not trying to solve all of next year's problems right now. But in a world where they, meaning the Steelers, would decide to go Kyler Murray, would you want to see Cliff Kingsbury in an interview? Or if Cliff Kingsbury comes in, do you start putting those pieces together? Do any players, any potential free agents, and any previous relationships and success that they may have had together tie this thing together short term for the next guy?
No way as a head coach. If Kingsbury is your OC or your quarterback coach with Kyler Murray, I think you're heading in the right direction for sure. And if Kyler Murray, I guess it'd be worth a shot. But I think we've seen, from him, if you get him great protection, great weapons, good running game, Kyler Murray can win a lot. I don't know that this team is there, right now. But if it was part of the deal, I was going to actually address Marcus Freeman there. I think that one is really interesting with the presser tomorrow. It could be about the BS thing that happened at the wrestling tournament. He might just want to sound off and give his side of the story. Could be that he's decided to move on. I'm going to take a hard pass on Marcus Freeman. I think there is such a big difference of what it takes to build culture in a program in college compared to the NFL, the age difference, the income difference. It's a totally different setup now. Even in the NIL era, maybe it's a little bit more similar, but like Freeman is a culture leader of men guy. I need, if you're going to come from college and have an impact, you better have a schematic advantage that's going to play out, and you've been in college where versatility and scheme is more important, and you're going to bring what you've learned to the pro game. I can't bring a program builder up here. I guess I could be convinced if you're like, but wait a minute, nobody's going to build a program like him, and he's going to bring these coordinators. I don't know about his coordinators though. I think Marcus Freeman would be, just like Harbaugh, just like Tomlin, where it's like these guys are coaching, they're building culture, and we're here playing football. We're teaching the fundamentals. We're putting guys in position and asking them to out-execute somebody. And that's just that is such a letdown for where we are in today's game.
Right. I mean, that's where Jesse Minter gets really interesting, because his success that got him to Sunday came on Saturday, right, during the national championship run. And then you start picking that apart with the stolen signals and all those things. But, I mean, they put some damn good tape on with those Chargers and affecting the game, at every level. I mean, he's an interesting name to watch. I already called Marcus Freeman Mike Tomlin 2.0. I want hard – you said hard pass, 1,000% smash that. And,
well, here's John Frischel. I just brought up this tweet here, and the main point of this tweet was the day of the rah-rah head coach in the NFL is done. If you can get the vibes guy on top of being just a better football coach, a better teacher, like that's a word we haven't used yet. You better be genius at teaching, because it's the precise execution and being in the position and hands placement and leverage and all these things coming together at the right time that's going to give you an advantage. It's going to make you the San Francisco 49ers with an average offensive line. And then you flip that over to defense with Robert Saleh and have all of those injuries and still finding a way to win double-digit games in a playoff game. Like, that stuff doesn't happen on accident. It's better teachers and better schemers.
I would love Saleh. I mean, maybe in some ways, depending on, you talk about who you're going to bring with you. If O'Connell has those young whiz kids on the offensive side of the ball locked down, but Kyle Shanahan's like, I'm him, you can take whoever you want, then that gets more interesting. If Saleh wins, if you will, bringing guys with him on the other side of the ball. I can't talk about Yudinski without talking about Stefanski staying in Poland, right? Like, all kidding aside, tough sell for me, even though he's a 2-time coach of the year, tough sell for me to say, yeah, we're going to take the coach who I don't think was the problem. I can't believe Andrew Berry is still employed when there's so many other dumpster fire issues beyond the guy in charge. But thinking about a lot of the stuff behind the scenes, a lot of the whispers, you don't know how much of that was driven by, the Sanders camp and the battle, with Gabriel and the quarterback fiasco, which also involved Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. Like, I don't want to see him driving down to Pittsburgh at all. I think he is a great coach, deserves a second shot, will do well. I just would love to see it be somewhere else.
All right, up next here on the Knoll Road. And I things look so much better when you get the quarterback. So
can I hit you with a list to that point?
Yeah.
Real quick. Agree, disagree. This is basically 30,000 feet, whoever it is. Ultimately, you need the answer at quarterback, right? This is my little list. You need the answer at QB. Huge. You got to figure out the poorest wide receiver room in the NFL, right? And maybe even convince DK Metcalf that he's really wide receiver too. You got to make a decision on whether you can save, salvage, or not, and this fifth-year option with Broderick Jones. You got to sign or draft a badass left guard either way, and solidify this line to get back to the ground and pound ways. Play action, maybe to DK over the top off that. And then you got to make critical decisions at literally in every room regarding this defense relative to George Allen over the hill gang, or teams like the Detroit Lions who might still think they're one player away regarding TJ Watt, regarding Cam Hayward, regarding Jalen Ramsey. And oh, by the way, right now, before you literally do anything else, before you trade Mike Tomlin to the Raiders and let them sign Cignetti and draft Fernando and maybe get 2-3 or 3-4-4 back, you got $65 million and 12 draft picks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what you're saying, this is doable. If the Steelers decide to go for it, I don't think they're too old. You know, I think they were too weak up the middle at nose tackle and linebacker. They were too weak at guard and left tackle. But there is a lot of stuff to like about this football team. I'm with you. I'd be surprised if they go and blow this thing up. Dylan Cook was impressive enough to me. You know, I'll run him at left tackle next year, and you find a big, young, strapping son of a gun to plug in there at left guard that can anchor, that can give you something in the run game. Then, you know, I think for sure, you know, what the list that you just rolled out there could be accomplished with the $65 million in cap space. Like, get this thing sewed up before you get to the draft, take the best player available, and, you know, pray like hell that your old guys can play young. But more than that, you just got to figure out a way to give them about 10 less snaps per game. You got to infuse this roster with young players that challenge those old guys, that can pick those old guys up when they're having a tough day. But like, this thing is, you know, I think is got to be one of the more attractive jobs out there for head coach candidates, not just because of the history and the tradition and what it means to be a Steelers head coach and all that, but, you know, because of what is already on the roster and how many draft picks they have. Like, they're in a good spot as long as they don't do this. Mazursky 8895 gets joke of the day here on the Knoll Road. Said, wait, I just realized we're going to promote Arthur Smith to head coach, aren't we?
Hashtag Scum Pulp, dude. Greatest show of all time, one of the greatest scenes in it, and holy cow. If that happened, I mean, there might be a revolt. I mean, they might tear down Acrisure. They might not let that stadium behind you host a game next year. And
so what's next for Tomlin, you think? The insiders are saying he wants warm weather and he wants to win
up, baby. Don't forget to send us back Minka.
I think the warm weather could be done right now. You mentioned Miami, Arizona is looking, Atlanta is open. I think if you want warmth, you go now. You know, maybe
Harbaugh is already interviewing with the Falcons. He's right, isn't he? Yeah, that was the first one he leaked.
I mean, next year, I guess Tampa will become open, but I can't see Jacksonville coming open. You know, I could see the advantage in not coaching for a year, and maybe he'll be so great on TV that he's like, you know what, I'd rather do this. It's a lot less stressful, and they're going to give me $20 million too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess whether it's Raheem Morris or Todd Bowles, either way, he's taken one of his guys' jobs. Maybe he can just hire him as the DC right back. But going back to Tampa, where it all began, you know, his Tony Dungy mentor, you know, mentee, you know, all the different connective tissue there would be really interesting, especially because, you know, Tom Brady proved that is an organization that is willing to go find the dudes, make the moves, you know, and take chances. And quite frankly, Tomlin's going to need some things built in wherever he goes next. He's going to probably want to cherry pick. And you look at that situation and you go, Mike Evans is probably gone because he's going to be too expensive unless he gets real team friendly because he wants to be a one helmet guy. You know, Godwin just keeps having nasty, terrible, no good, very bad injuries. Is he going to have another few years left in him? And then, oh, by the way, here comes a Mecca through that door, but it's Baker and he can't stay healthy and he's turnover prone and he's like the anti-Tomlin quarterback. So do you think he looks at that and goes, versus looking at, you know, Arizona, where he's always wanted to have, you know, he's always talked about how much he's enamored with the Lamar Jacksons and the mobile quarterbacks. And then he signed Justin Fields and he put him in handcuffs, right? I mean, he really like, and look, say what you want about Justin Fields. I know he's proven more to be less than what I think we all hope he could have been, but he looked really good in black and gold, which makes you think about what Mike Tomlin might want, you know, built into where he goes. Does he really want to sign up for a rookie QB where he's going to go build and hang out, or does he want to go into something that's a little bit more ready-made, knowing he's the exact same age as his mentor Tony Dungy when he hung him up?
Well, brother, I do want to say great first season here on the Knoll Road. Thank you so much for talking me into launching this thing. I'm excited to be covering the Steelers and talking about them. We'll go upload 4 times a week, long form content all the way through this coaching search and the draft and free agency and all this. And I think it stands to be one of the busiest and most exciting off seasons that the Steelers have had. We'll be back soon here as this week progresses and we start to get more news and reports about where this thing could be headed. And until then, we'll see you right here